thought that positive thinking was a way of looking at the world, saying that you could do whatever you wanted. If you wanted to become a president, you could be. If you wanted to become an astronaut and go to Mars, you could become one. With a little bit of positive thinking and some hard work, you could do whatever you set your mind to do. My own personal aspirations have not been quite that big, however. And that July morning in 1980, all I really wanted to do was step foot on the island of ULOPA. So I set out with some positive thinking, feeling very good about myself. Now let me back up a little bit. First of all, where is ULOPA? Why did I even want to go there? I was 20 years old, studying abroad in the island nation of Western Samoa, and I was living on the island of Manono. Manono was about 1 square mile around. It had about 800 residents. It had no electricity. We used kerosene lanterns for light. We used the imu or rock oven to cook with. We had no running water, no streams, no lakes, nothing like that. We used catchment water to wash ourselves with. And they discouraged us from using the catchment to drink. We were supposed to only use coconut water because it was more plentiful. Now, this is in the days before cell phones, and there was a single payphone that served the entire island. To get to the island, there was a small boat, small open boat that would run on the high tide. And once you were on the island, there were no cars, no bikes, no vehicles of any sort. And the only way to get around was walking, and you could walk around the island in just about an hour. Now, there were about 8 or 9 of us study abroad students there. Several of them were surfers from Hawaii, and we were each stationed with our own individual family where we would learn the Fa'a Samoa or the Samoan lifestyle. One part about the lifestyle is that the ocean was not a form of recreation, it was a form of sustenance and food, and the ocean was a form of transportation and also a limited source of plumbing. So a couple of the study abroad students that I was friends with, we were walking around the island one day, and we got to this far part of the island, and we were looking out in the distance at this uninhabited mystery island of ULOPA. It was about a mile away, and these friends of mine that had their surfboards unused wanted to paddle out there. They said, why don't we go paddle out to ULOPA? And I got the idea in my mind, well, if they can paddle, then I could swim. I'm at least as good of a swimmer as they are paddlers. It turned out they never made the attempt, but I had set my mind that one day I would swim out that mile to ULOPA, and I did. So on that day, I was walking around. This time I was walking around the island on my own, and I got to that same little stretch of sand that we would call a beach. It's a very little beach, and I was looking at ULOPA there, and I took my slippers off, and I was wearing my bathing suit and my lava, which is a sarong, and we had to wear the sarong on the island because it was a sign of modesty. You know, wearing a bathing suit was completely inappropriate. So I stepped in the water, wading in the water, and thought, well, today is as good of a day as any. Why don't I just go there right now? So I set out without telling anyone about my spontaneous plans. I thought no one would miss me at all. I was actually an amazing swimmer. I swam and swam the mile out, and I was actually, even though I had my lava on, I was doing really well. And within an hour, I was at the shore of ULOPA in the water, looking at the island. And it was beautiful. And I wanted to step foot on it. But I looked down, And I noticed first a couple of problems. The first problem was that as I looked down, I saw the entire reef around me was covered with crown of thorns starfish. Now these starfish are a huge plague on the reef in the Indo-Pacific region and causing many, many problems, killing tons of reef areas. It's really a devastation. But I was more concerned about what they would do to me. Each crown of thorns starfish is about 1 foot to 3 feet across. It has 18 arms, and they have thorns, hence the name crown of thorns. The thorns, the inch long or more thorns, are filled with a venom that can cause nausea, vomiting, severe pain, even death in some rare situations. I definitely did not want to step on one. So I looked for a place to put my feet down. I couldn't find anywhere, nowhere. I swam to one side of the island. Still couldn't find a spot. I swam around the other direction. I still could not find any spot to put my feet down. I didn't know what I was going to do, except the only thing I could do, which was swim back. It was at that point that I noticed the second challenge that I had, a much bigger challenge actually than that. The second challenge is that I realized I wasn't actually all that great of a swimmer. I had arrived at ULOPA. I had swum there with a very strong current. And now that I was turning around and swimming back to my home island of Monona, I realized that I had to now swim unrested, tired, alone, over a mile against a very strong current. I began to get very scared. So much for positive thinking. I'd broken all the rules of safe swimming, and now I was paying the price. I could easily die out there in the savage ocean. No one would know what had happened to me. No one knew where I was even. And I actually didn't know what I was going to do. I was scared, but I wasn't going to give up. I got my second wind and I powered out and I swam as hard as I could. Swam and swam, stroke after stroke, and it was getting me nowhere. Just making very little progress. I looked up and I'm feeling like I'm on a watery treadmill. But then I looked around and I saw in the distance there were a couple of fishing boats. I thought, thank God I can be saved. So I took off the lava, the sarong that I'd been swimming with this entire time, and I waved it into the air against the wind, against the current, and against the water, the choppy water, trying as hard as I could to get their attention. After 5-10 minutes of waving my lava in the air, I noticed the fishing boats starting to move, and they were moving in the opposite direction. They weren't going to save me. I realized right then, if I was going to be okay, if I was going to survive, I would have to save myself. I continued my swim, and I swam as hard as I could. I saw that little beach way in the distance, and as I swam as hard and strong as I could, I realized there was no way that I was going to make it back to that little beach. So I kept powering out, and I used the current, and I would swim against the current as much as I could, and then let that current push me back. And I realized that at least I could let the current take me to a different part of the island of Monona that I wanted to get to. and make it back, if not to that little beach, to another part of the island, a much worse place to land on, a rougher coastline, a rockier shore, but still on the island, and I would be okay. I swam and swam and swam, and finally, after probably another 2 hours or so of swimming, I was facing the shoreline of Monono. I noticed my program leader waving at me, so happy to see me. And I pulled myself on the sharp rocks and clambered onto shore against the wind, against the current kind of sloshing me around. I was cut up, I was exhausted, but I was safe. I was gone for several hours that day. It turns out the entire island had been alerted that I was gone. They had all been looking for me. Each of the 4 little villages had been looking for me. And when no one could find me, they assumed that I had gone into the water, perhaps died in the water. Those fishing boats actually had been sent to find me. I realized that day that positive thinking for me wasn't just stating an affirmation. It wasn't saying that the glass is half full instead of half empty, and it wasn't saying it's all good when it isn't. In fact, it wasn't even a matter of finding the good in a bad situation. I guarantee you, telling myself, oh, the water is nice and warm, would have been no consolation to me on that terrifying, terrifying day. I think positive thinking is digging deep inside of yourself and facing your challenges head on, knowing that things aren't always going to be easy, but you can push through, find that core of strength and energy that you have, and do what it takes to work through and come through on the other side. My team leader was there. He put me in a boat that day afterwards and said, we're going around the island. You're going to tell everyone what happened to you. So we went in this little boat, this fishing boat, and we went to each of these 4 villages around Monono, and I told my story and told people that I was safe. And then they took me out in the boat to ULOPA. I stepped foot on the island. I climbed the rocks. I explored the island, and I actually got to be there. And then we headed back for the island of Monono. I had 2 miracles that day. The first miracle is that I found that positive power inside of myself that saved myself on that treacherous, treacherous swim. And the second miracle is that I did get to step foot on the island of ULOPA, not on my own, however, but with my team. Thank you.